The man bleeding out on silk sheets wasn't supposed to be her problem, but when the guards dragged Lydia Vance through the obsidian doors of the underground palace, nobody seemed interested in her protests. "I'm not a healer," she shouted for the 7th time, twisting against iron grips that didn't budge. "You've got the wrong person." The taller guard, pale as moonlight with hair like spun silver, ignored her completely. They swept through corridors that shouldn't exist beneath the streets of modern-day Prague, past tapestries that depicted battles from centuries she'd only read about in history books. The architecture was impossible Gothic arches meeting sleek modern glass, chandeliers dripping with crystals above floors inlaid with LED strips that pulsed like veins. Muriel Voss, the guard, finally spoke, his voice accented with something ancient. "You were summoned 3 hours ago. The king is dying. My name is Lydia Vance. I'm a pharmacy student." Not they shoved her through carved double doors into a bedchamber that stole her breath. The room stretched vast as a cathedral, dominated by a bed draped in crimson and black, and on that bed lay a man who couldn't possibly be real. He was beautiful in the way disasters were beautiful. White skin that seemed to glow against dark sheets, hair the color of fresh snow spilling across pillows, features so perfect they looked carved from marble. But beauty didn't matter much when blood soaked through bandages wrapped around his torso, when his breathing came shallow and wrong, when the wound in his side leaked something too dark to be fully human blood. A woman with violet eyes and platinum braids rushed to Lydia's side. "Finally, why didn't you come when we first called?" "Because I'm not who you think I am," Lydia said desperately. "You want Muriel Voss, she's a healer who works at the apothecary on Karlova Street. I'm Lydia Vance. I just started my internship there 2 weeks ago." The woman's face went sheet white. No, this isn't. We sent for the master healer. You're wearing her cloak." Lydia looked down at the green velvet cloak she'd borrowed from the back room because the November rain had been pouring and hers was soaked. "She let me borrow it. She left hours ago for some emergency." "This emergency," the violet-eyed woman whispered. "God's below. We took the wrong human." On the bed, the dying man made a sound low in his throat. Despite everything, Lydia found herself moving closer. Her training, limited as it was, screamed at her. The bandages were wrong, too tight in some places, not tight enough in others. The wound itself looked infected, edges blackened in a way that made her stomach turn. "What happened to him?" she asked. "Assassination attempt," the guard who dragged her in said flatly. "Iron blade, blessed silver coating, dipped in extract of white oak. 3 poisons designed specifically to kill our kind. Vampire." The word hung unspoken but obvious. Lydia had heard the rumors, the whispered stories about the old families who lived beneath Prague's ancient streets, who ran the city from shadows and smoke. She'd dismissed them as folklore, the kind of stories tourists loved and locals told to add mystery to their beautiful historical city. The man on the bed opened his eyes. They were red as fresh blood, red as rubies, red as every warning her hindbrain screamed at her. They focused on her with predatory intensity despite his obvious pain. "You're not Muriel." His voice was rough, each word clearly costing him. "No, Your Majesty," the violet-eyed woman said quickly. "There was a mistake. I'm so sorry. We'll find the real healer immediately. No time." He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "You girl, what do you know?" Lydia's hands shook. "I'm in my 2nd year of pharmacy school. I've done clinical rotations, wound care, toxicology basics. Nothing like this, nothing supernatural. But you understand poisons." It wasn't a question. "Some. In theory." Those red eyes pinned her. "Then theorize how to keep me alive." The violet-eyed woman made a sound of protest. "Sire, she's not qualified." Seraphine. One word and the woman fell silent. The king's gaze never left Lydia. "I can feel the white oak burning through my veins. The iron keeps my healing suppressed. The silver." He drew a shuddering breath. "The silver is spreading toward my heart. I have hours at best." "Muriel isn't here. You are. So tell me, what would you do?" Lydia's mind raced. This was insane. This was impossible. But he was right there, dying right in front of her, and something in those ancient eyes made her forget every reasonable fear. "I need to see the wound properly," she heard herself say. "And I need to know exactly what you've already tried." Seraphine gestured sharply, and servants moved like shadows to bring surgical lamps, to arrange instruments on silver trays. Lydia washed her hands in the provided basin, noting the water had been mixed with something that smelled astringent and herbal. At least they understood basic sterilization. When she peeled back the bandages, she had to fight not to gag. The wound was worse than she'd thought, a deep puncture between his ribs, edges black and spreading outward in veiny patterns that looked almost like roots. The flesh around it had a silver sheen that definitely wasn't natural. "You've tried to heal it?" she asked. "His body can't," Seraphine said quietly. "The iron in his system blocks our regeneration. We've tried drawing the poisons out with blood magic, with herbs, with everything we know. Nothing works. The poisons are designed to work together, remove one, the other strengthen. Lydia bent closer, examining the wound with the clinical detachment they'd drilled into her during training. Separate the person from the patient. Focus on the problem. The silver is particulate, she murmured. I can see fragments, if it's spreading through the bloodstream. She looked up at the king. You need dialysis, blood filtering. We need to clean your blood while simultaneously removing the physical poison sources from the wound itself. Explain, he commanded. The iron is keeping you from healing, so we can't rely on your body. The silver is poisoning you from the inside, so we need to filter it out mechanically. The white oak, she frowned, thinking. White oak is toxic to vampires because of the tannins and compounds in the wood itself, right? It's a cellular poison, correct, Seraphine said, surprise in her voice. Then we need to bind it, neutralize it chemically before it does more damage. Lydia's mind raced through everything she'd learned about toxin binding agents, about chelation therapy, about the properties of different compounds. Do you have activated charcoal? Prussian blue? Any advanced filtration equipment? We have laboratories, Seraphine said. Medical facilities that would rival any human hospital. We're not primitive, then we might have a chance. Lydia met the king's eyes again. But I need to be honest, I've never done anything like this. I'm working from theory and extrapolation. I could make things worse. I'm already dying, he said simply. Worse is inevitable. Better is merely improbable. I'll take those odds. Something shifted in his expression then, something that made him look less like a dying king and more like a man, a very dangerous man who decided to trust her. What's your name? He asked. Lydia Vance, Lydia Vance. He said it like he was memorizing it, tasting it. I am Constantine Drikaleshti, king of the Night Court, lord of the Eastern Territories, guardian of the old ways. A slight curve touched his lips, and apparently entirely at your mercy. The next hours blurred into a desperate, focused chaos. Seraphine proved invaluable, translating Lydia's modern medical knowledge into things their ancient but advanced facilities could provide. They had dialysis equipment. Vampires apparently suffered blood disorders just like humans, immortality notwithstanding. They had the chemicals she needed, the tools, the sterile environment. But they didn't have experience with this specific combination of poisons, and neither did she. Lydia worked with hands that steadied as she focused, cleaning the wound while Constantine was connected to machines that cycled his blood through filters designed to catch silver particles. She irrigated the puncture with solutions meant to neutralize the white oak compounds, working with painful slowness to debride the blackened tissue. You're going to feel this, she warned before making the first cut into healthy tissue. I need to remove all the contaminated area. I've felt worse, Constantine said, but his jaw clenched as she worked. She'd thought he might scream, or rage, or use his supernatural strength to stop her when the pain got too intense. Instead, he watched her with those unsettling red eyes, tracking every movement of her hands with absolute focus. Tell me about yourself, he said after a particularly difficult section. Distract me from the fact that a pharmacy student is performing surgery. That's not reassuring for either of us, Lydia muttered, but she understood the need for distraction. I'm 22. I grew up in London but moved to Prague for university because the program was better and the city was beautiful. I live in a tiny apartment in Old Town with 2 roommates who think I'm working a late shift right now. She carefully extracted another silver fragment. I'd planned to spend tonight studying for my pharmacology exam. Not this. Life rarely asks our permission before changing course. His voice had gone rough again. I spent tonight hearing petitions from my court, settling disputes that have festered for decades, trying to prevent a war with the Western Territories over trade rights and blood treaties. He paused as she worked on a particularly deep section. I'd planned to retire early, review reports, perhaps read. Not this, someone really wanted you dead, Lydia observed, washing away more contaminated blood. This wasn't a random attack, no. Something dark crossed his features. This was precise, professional. Someone knew exactly which poisons would work, exactly how to deliver them, exactly when I'd be most vulnerable. An inside job? Very inside. His eyes cut to Seraphine, who stood nearby monitoring the filtration equipment. How many knew about tonight's private audience? Fewer than 20, Seraphine said quietly. All trusted advisors. Then one of our trusted advisors wants a new king. The words hung heavy in the air. Lydia forced herself to focus on the physical problem in front of her. Politics and assassination plots were beyond her scope. Keeping this vampire alive through the night, that was concrete. That was something she could attempt. 2 hours in, Constantine's vitals began to stabilize. The dialysis was working, pulling silver from his bloodstream in quantities that shocked her. The neutralizing agents seemed to be binding the white oak compounds. And with the wound properly cleaned and the iron fragments removed, his body's natural healing was starting to kick in slowly but noticeably. "It's working," Seraphine breathed. "God's below, it's actually working." Lydia didn't let herself celebrate yet. She'd learned that lesson in clinical rotations. Patients could crash at any moment. She kept monitoring, kept adjusting, kept watching those slowly healing wound edges with cautious hope. Dawn was breaking somewhere above them when Constantine finally fell into what looked like genuine sleep rather than pain-induced unconsciousness. The wound had closed to a thin line, still angry and red but no longer life-threatening. The black veining had faded. His breathing came deep, and even Lydia slumped into a chair, exhausted beyond measure. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She'd just performed emergency surgery on a vampire king. She'd saved his life. Probably, maybe, if he didn't crash in the next few hours. "You should rest," Seraphine said gently. "We have rooms prepared. I should go home." "I should." Lydia gestured vaguely. "People will wonder where I am. It's nearly dawn. No one will question you sleeping after a night shift." Seraphine's smile was kind. "Please, stay until we're certain he's stable. He would want to thank you properly." Too tired to argue, Lydia let herself be led to a chamber that was smaller than Constantine's but still absurdly luxurious. She fell onto silk sheets without bothering to undress, and sleep claimed her instantly. She woke to find Constantine sitting in a chair beside her bed. Lydia jerked upright, heart hammering. The vampire king looked different in the soft lamplight, still pale, still otherworldly, but no longer on death's door. He wore a black shirt that contrasted sharply with his white hair, and those red eyes watched her with disconcerting intensity. "You know it's creepy to watch people sleep, right?" The words were out before Lydia could stop them. "Even if you're a vampire. Especially if you're a vampire." His lips twitched. "My apologies. I wanted to be here when you woke. To thank you. You're welcome. You can thank me by not being creepy about it." This time he actually smiled, and it transformed his face completely. "You saved my life, Lydia Vance. You, a human pharmacy student who was dragged here by mistake, succeeded where my court's best healers failed. That deserves more than simple thanks." Lydia rubbed her eyes, trying to wake up properly. "I just applied basic medical logic and got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, entirely focused on her. "You saw what needed to be done and did it without hesitation. You worked for hours to save someone you didn't know, of a species you probably feared." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Because you needed help. Because I was there. Because—" She shrugged helplessly. "Because watching someone die when you might be able to prevent it isn't something I can do. Even if that someone is a vampire king who technically kidnapped me." "Technically," he agreed, amusement coloring his voice. "I'll have words with my guards about improving their victim identification." "Please do." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Lydia became aware that she probably looked terrible, rumpled clothes, hair a mess, probably bags under her eyes. Meanwhile, Constantine looked like he'd stepped out of a Gothic painting, perfect and composed. "What happens now?" she asked. "Do I get to go home and pretend this was all a weird dream?" Something flickered across his expression. "Do you want to?" "I want to understand what I've gotten myself into," Lydia said honestly. "You said someone in your inner circle tried to kill you. That means they might try again. That means anyone who helped you is potentially at risk. You're perceptive. I'm practical." She met his eyes steadily. "If I'm in danger because I saved your life, I deserve to know." Constantine was quiet for a long moment, and Lydia got the sense he was deciding something important. Finally he stood and offered his hand. "Come with me. There's something you should see." She took his hand. His skin was cool but not cold, his grip careful, and let him lead her through the underground palace. In daylight, or whatever passed for daylight down here, the place was even more impressive. They passed vampires going about their business, all of them pale and graceful and beautiful in that unsettling way. All of them stopped to stare at her, and their king walking side by side. Constantine brought her to a room filled with screens and maps. Seraphine was there, along with several others who had the look of advisors or generals. "Show her," Constantine commanded. Seraphine pulled up footage on the largest screen. Security camera recordings from the previous night, showing Constantine's private audience chamber. Lydia watched as a figure in servant's clothes approached the king with a tray of wine. Watched as Constantine turned away for a moment. Watched as the servant struck with impossible speed, driving a blade into the king's side before he could react. The servant's face was visible for just a moment before Constantine's guards descended. Lydia felt her stomach drop. That's Muriel, she whispered. The real healer. The woman you were trying to summon. Yes, Constantine said quietly. She was working with the conspirators. The plan was elegant: poison me with substances only she could treat, then let me die while pretending to help. No one would question the king's own healer being unable to save him from such specific poisons. But they grabbed me instead. But they grabbed you instead, he confirmed. Someone who had no idea what was happening. No loyalty to the conspirators. No reason to let me die. Their perfect plan fell apart because of a borrowed cloak and a case of mistaken identity. Lydia sank into a nearby chair, processing. So Muriel knows her plan failed. She knows I saved you instead, which means she and her co-conspirators will want to eliminate the evidence of their failure, Seraphine finished grimly. You, specifically, wonderful. Lydia pressed her hands to her face. I saved a vampire king's life and now I'm on a supernatural hit list. My roommates are going to be so confused when I die mysteriously. You're not going to die, Constantine said, and there was something fierce in his voice that made her look up. I'm not going to allow it. With respect, Your Majesty, you almost died yourself last night. Because I was caught unprepared. That won't happen again. He moved closer and Lydia was struck again by how utterly inhuman he was despite appearing so perfectly reformed. I protect what's mine, Lydia Vance, and you became mine the moment you chose to save my life. That's very possessive. I'm a vampire and a king. Possessive is rather foundational to my nature. Despite everything, Lydia felt a smile tug at her lips. There was something refreshing about his bluntness, his complete lack of pretense. He wasn't trying to be anything other than exactly what he was. So what do you suggest? She asked. I can't exactly live in an underground palace forever. I have classes, a life, responsibility. You can continue your life, Constantine said, but with protection, guards, wards, safeguards, and in exchange. He paused, considering. I would like you to stay on as my personal healer. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone who might be secretly trying to kill me, he pointed out. And you've already proven you can think creatively about problems no one else can solve. I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who has no political ties to my court, no hidden agendas, no reason to want me dead, except for the whole kidnapping thing, which I apologized for. You really didn't. He inclined his head slightly. Then I apologize for my guard's overzealous and imprecise abduction. Better? Lydia found herself laughing despite the absurdity of the situation. This is insane. All of this is completely insane. Welcome to my world, Constantine said dryly. Will you accept? I'll pay you extremely well. You'll have access to medical facilities and resources beyond anything available in the human world. You can continue your studies. We have connections at the university. All I ask is that you be available when needed, and that you help me navigate this situation until we identify all the conspirators. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It was everything Lydia should refuse. But when she looked at Constantine, really looked at him, at the intelligence in those red eyes, at the strength barely contained in his posture, at the strange vulnerability that came from trusting her with his life, she found herself nodding. Okay, yes, but I have conditions. Name them. I want to actually learn proper healing techniques. If I'm going to be responsible for keeping you alive, I need real training, not just pharmacy school knowledge. I want access to your medical library, to your healers who aren't trying to kill you, to everything I need to become actually qualified. Agreed. I want protection extended to my roommates and family, not just me. If these conspirators are thorough, they might target people I care about, already arranged, and I want honesty. If I'm risking my life for this, I need to know what's really happening. No political games, no hiding things for my own good. If something affects my safety or my ability to do this job, I need to know. Constantine studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You have my word. I'll be honest with you, Lydia Vance, in all things that concern you. That's not a promise I make lightly. Something in his tone suggested there was more weight to those words than she understood, but Lydia decided to take it at face value. She stood and held out her hand. Then we have a deal. He took her hand, and this time the touch lingered. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, and Lydia felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. We have a deal, he confirmed, and his smile was genuinely warm. Welcome to the night court, Lydia Vance. Try not to let it kill you. The next weeks were a blur of activity that left Lydia questioning her life choices on an hourly basis. Constantine kept his word about training. She spent mornings at university attending her regular classes, afternoons in the underground palace's extensive medical wing learning vampire physiology from healers who'd practiced for centuries, and evenings reviewing cases and preparing treatments. The guards who followed her everywhere were subtle but present. She'd spotted them on the second day. shadows that moved too smoothly to be human. By the third day, she'd stopped being bothered by it. What bothered her more was how often she found herself thinking about Constantine. He was nothing like anyone she'd ever met, ancient and powerful, dangerous and utterly confident in who and what he was. But he was also surprisingly easy to talk to. He'd appear in the medical wing while she was studying, ask about her progress, stay to discuss everything from politics to philosophy to her opinions on modern medicine versus traditional healing. "You're staring at that text like it personally offended you," he said one evening, materializing beside her study desk without a sound. Lydia jumped, then glared at him. "Could you not do the creepy vampire-appearing thing? Use a door like a normal person." "I did use the door. You were too focused to notice." He peered at her textbook. "Hemodynamics? Appropriate, given our situation. I'm trying to understand blood flow patterns in vampire physiology versus humans. It's different, but the texts I have access to are all written in Old Church Slavonic or Medieval Latin, and my translation spells only work so well." Constantine settled into the chair beside her, close enough that she could feel the coolness that radiated from him. "Show me the passage." She pointed to the section giving her trouble. He leaned in, reading over her shoulder, and began translating. His voice was low and steady, and Lydia found herself paying more attention to the cadence than the content. "You're not listening," he said, amusement threading through his words. "I am." "Then what did I just say about arterial pressure differentials?" Lydia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That they're differential?" He laughed, and the sound was rich and genuine. "You're a terrible liar. What's distracting you?" "You," she thought but didn't say. Instead, she gestured vaguely at the books. "Just tired. It's been a lot to take in." "You're doing remarkably well." He said it casually, but there was approval in his tone that made something warm bloom in her chest. Most humans would have fled screaming by now, or at least asked substantially more questions about the nature of vampirism and our society. "I figure I'll learn as I go," Lydia said. "Right now I'm more concerned with making sure I can actually keep you alive if something happens again." Always so practical. Someone has to be. "You're the one who sits in the medical wing reading poetry while I try to study." "I'm not reading poetry. I'm reviewing reports." He gestured to the tablet he'd set aside. "But even kings need breaks, and I find your company refreshing." The way he said it made Lydia's heart do a strange skip. She told herself it was just the stress of the situation, the surreal nature of her new reality. It definitely wasn't because Constantine was beautiful and intense and looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in his very long life. Definitely not that. "Have you found the conspirators?" she asked, changing the subject to safer ground. Constantine's expression darkened. "We've identified 3 so far. All have been arrested and are awaiting trial. But Muriel has gone to ground. She has help, resources we haven't tracked yet. And there are others involved, I'm certain of it. Someone high-ranking enough to organize this, to recruit a skilled healer, to obtain the specific poisons used. You think it's someone close to you. I know it is." Frustration edged his words. "The attack happened in my private chambers during a closed audience. The poisons used required intimate knowledge of my specific vulnerabilities. Different vampires react differently to various substances. This wasn't general knowledge. This was personal." Lydia set down her pen, giving him her full attention. "Who would benefit from your death?" "Several people. My cousin Marcellus, who would inherit if I died without an heir. Lord Vladislav, who disagrees with my policies regarding human-vampire relations. Lady Anastasia, who wants to expand our territory through war, which I've consistently prevented." He ran a hand through his white hair, the gesture unexpectedly human. "And those are just the obvious candidates. Being king sounds exhausting. It has its moments." He met her eyes, and something in his expression softened. Though lately it's had its compensations as well. The air between them felt charged suddenly, heavy with something Lydia didn't want to name. She looked away first, her pulse hammering in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "I should get back to studying," she said quietly. "Of course." But he didn't move, and neither did she. The moment stretched until Seraphine entered, her expression grave. "Sire, we have a situation." Constantine was on his feet instantly, all trace of softness gone. "What kind of situation?" "There's been another attempt. Not on you, on Lady Vance." Lydia's blood went cold. "What?" "Your apartment was broken into an hour ago," Seraphine said. "Your roommates are safe. Our guards got them out. But someone tried very hard to get to you, and when they found you gone, they left a message." She held out a photograph taken at the scene. Lydia's stomach turned. Written on her bedroom wall in what looked disturbingly like blood were 4 words. "Return with what you stole." "They mean you," Constantine said, his voice gone deadly quiet. "They want me to send you away, remove your protection, make you vulnerable." "Well, That's not ominous at all, Lydia muttered, trying to keep her voice steady. Konstantin's hand found hers, his grip careful but firm. You're staying here, in the palace. Full time. I'm not risking your safety. I have classes. We'll arrange for you to continue your education remotely. Your roommates will be relocated to secured housing. Everything you need will be brought here. His eyes met hers, and they were burning with an intensity that stole her breath. I told you, Lydia, I protect what's mine, and I'm not letting them take you from me. The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her, should have raised every feminist objection she had. Instead, it made her feel safe in a way she'd never experienced before. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay, I'll stay. The relief that crossed his face was brief but unmistakable. His hand squeezed hers once before releasing it. Good. Seraphine, arrange for Lady Vance's belongings to be collected and brought to the East Wing. Put her in the chambers adjacent to mine. Adjacent, Lydia asked. So I can reach you quickly if needed, he said smoothly. For medical emergencies. Right, medical emergencies. His lips twitched in what might have been amusement, but his eyes remained serious. Also because those chambers are the most defensible in the palace aside from my own. No one gets in or out without going through guards who've served me for centuries. That made more sense. Though Lydia couldn't quite shake the feeling that there was more to it than he was saying. Living in the palace full-time changed everything. Lydia found herself drawn deeper into the intricate world of vampire politics and society. She attended court sessions, sitting beside Constantine as he heard petitions and settled disputes. She learned the hierarchies, the ancient protocols, the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed the Night Court. And she learned about Constantine himself, not just the king, but the man beneath the crown. He'd been turned during the 15th century, she discovered, a human nobleman who'd caught the attention of an ancient vampire queen. He'd ruled for over 200 years, navigating wars and political upheavals, protecting his people through changing times. He was respected, feared, and according to Seraphine, genuinely loved by most of his subjects. He's fair, Seraphine explained one afternoon while showing Lydia the palace libraries. Firm when he needs to be, but never cruel. He's pushed for modernization, for cooperation with humans rather than the old ways of predation and hiding. It's made him enemies among the traditionalists. Is that why someone wants him dead? Partly. Seraphine pulled a book from a high shelf with casual grace. But it's more complicated than that. Constantine refuses to take a consort, refuses to produce an heir. That creates uncertainty, political instability. If he would just choose someone, marry, secure the succession, much of this would resolve itself. Why hasn't he? Lydia asked, curious despite herself. Seraphine gave her a look that was far too knowing. He says he hasn't found anyone worthy of the position. Someone who would be a true partner, not just a political alliance. Someone strong enough to stand beside him, intelligent enough to challenge him, brave enough to tell him when he's wrong. She paused meaningfully. Someone like you, perhaps. I'm human, Lydia said quickly, and completely unqualified to be any kind of royal consort. You're human now, Seraphine said. But that could change if you wanted it to. As for qualifications, you've already proven yourself more than most vampires 10 times your age. You saved his life, earned his trust, and you're not afraid of him. That's rarer than you think. Lydia's mind was reeling. He hasn't, we're not, this is just a professional arrangement. Keep telling yourself that. Seraphine's smile was gentle. But I've served Constantine for 90 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. That conversation haunted Lydia for days. She started noticing things she'd tried to ignore: the way Constantine's eyes followed her when she moved through a room, the way he found excuses to be near her, the careful way he never quite touched her unless necessary, but seemed to hover in her space like he couldn't help himself. And worse, she noticed her own reactions. The way her heart raced when he entered a room. The way she looked forward to their evening conversations. The way she'd started thinking of him not as the vampire king but as Constantine. Brilliant and complex and unexpectedly kind. This was dangerous. This was foolish. This was absolutely something she shouldn't be feeling. But apparently her heart hadn't gotten the memo. The crisis came 3 weeks after Lydia moved into the palace. She was working late in the medical wing, reviewing case notes, when alarms began shrieking through the corridors. She'd been drilled on emergency protocols: lock down, stay put, wait for guards. Instead, Constantine burst through the door, moving faster than she'd ever seen him move. We need to go, now, what's happening? Coup attempt. They've gotten past the outer defenses. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a hidden panel in the wall. This leads to secure tunnels. You'll be safe there until— I'm not hiding while you fight, Lydia said. You're human. You'll die. I'm your healer. If you get hurt, you'll need me. They stared at each other for a frozen moment. Then Constantine cursed in a language she didn't recognize and pulled her close, one arm wrapped protectively around her waist. "Stay behind me. Do exactly as I say. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood, Constantine? Understood?" His eyes blazed red, and for the first time since that first night, Lydia saw the predator in him fully unleashed. "Understood," she whispered. They moved through corridors that had become war zones. Lydia caught glimpses of fighting vampires moving with impossible speed, the clash of weapons, the scent of blood thick in the air. Constantine kept her behind him, his body a shield, moving them toward the throne room where Seraphine had said the fighting was concentrated. They rounded a corner and found Marcellus, Constantine's cousin, standing with a group of armed vampires. His smile was cruel. "Hello, cousin. I was hoping you'd come personally, Marcellus." Constantine's voice was ice. "Stand down. This doesn't have to end in your execution." "Oh, but it does, though not my execution." Marcellus's eyes cut to Lydia. "You've become predictable, Constantine. We knew you'd protect the human personally. We knew exactly how to draw you out." Lydia felt Constantine tense. "This isn't about politics. This is about her. This is about you being weak," Marcellus spat. "Centuries as king. And you throw it all away for a human girl? You refuse to take a proper consort, refuse to secure our line, and now you're playing house with prey? You've become everything our kind should despise." "I've become everything our kind should aspire to," Constantine shot back. "Strong enough to choose my own path, wise enough to see value beyond our traditional prejudices, confident enough to not need ancient hatred to define myself." "Pretty words, they won't save you." Marcellus moved and so did his guards, but Constantine was faster. He pushed Lydia toward an alcove with one hand while drawing a sword with the other where he'd had a sword. Lydia had no idea and met Marcellus's attack with devastating precision. The fight was brutal and beautiful. Two vampires moving faster than human eyes should be able to track. Lydia pressed herself into the alcove, watching in horrified awe as Constantine fought off multiple opponents with lethal grace. He was magnificent, terrifying, and powerful, and completely in control despite the odds. But there were too many. For every attacker he disabled, another appeared. Lydia saw him take a hit, saw blood bloom across his white shirt, and her healer's instincts overrode her common sense. She ran to him. "Lydia, no." Constantine's shout was too late. She was already there, already pulling medical supplies from the bag she'd learned to carry everywhere, already pressing gauze to his wound, even as he tried to shield her from another attack. And then Muriel appeared, materializing from shadows with a knife in hand and murder in her eyes. "You should have let him die," the healer hissed, driving the blade toward Lydia's heart. Lydia threw herself sideways, felt the blade score across her shoulder instead of piercing her chest, and screamed. Pain exploded through her, bright and terrible. She heard Constantine roar an inhuman sound of pure rage, and then the world became a blur of violence. When her vision cleared, Constantine held Muriel by the throat, lifted off the ground, his eyes burning like coals. His voice was something from nightmares. "You hurt. She's just human," Muriel choked out. "Why do you care?" "Because she's mine," Constantine growled. "Because she saved my life when you tried to take it. Because she matters more than you could possibly understand." His hand tightened. "And because I love her." The words hung in the sudden silence. Everyone had stopped fighting, staring at their king as he made a declaration that changed everything. Constantine looked at Lydia, his expression raw and open in a way she'd never seen. "I love you, Lydia Vance. I have since you stood over my bleeding body and chose to fight for me when you had every reason to run. I love your courage, your intelligence, your stubborn refusal to be intimidated by things that should terrify you. I love the way you challenge me, the way you make me think, the way you've brought light into a life that's been dark for far too long." Marcellus made a sound of disgust. "You've truly fallen, cousin. Confessing love to a human in the middle of battle like some lovesick." Constantine dropped Muriel and moved faster than thought, his sword at Marcellus's throat. "Finish that sentence, please." Marcellus stared at his cousin, at the deadly promise in those red eyes, and apparently decided he'd rather live. His shoulders sagged. "I yield. You attempted regicide, attempted murder of my healer, treason on multiple counts. Give me one reason I shouldn't execute you right now." "Because he's your family," Lydia said quietly, pressing her hand to her bleeding shoulder. "And because mercy is what separates you from the kind of king he'd be." Constantine looked at her, something like wonder in his expression. Then he pulled his sword back, though he didn't sheath it. "You're banished," he told Marcellus. "You and everyone who stood with you tonight. Leave the night court, leave Prague. If I ever see you again, mercy won't be on the table." Marcellus and his conspirators fled, and gradually the palace quieted. Guards rounded up the remaining attackers, secured the damaged areas, began the cleanup. And through it all, Constantine never left Lydia's side. He carried her to the medical wing himself, his touch impossibly gentle despite the blood hers and others covering them both. He stood over the healers while they cleaned and stitched her wound, his presence both protective and threatening in a way that had them working with exceptional care. When they were finally alone, when Lydia sat on a medical bed with her shoulder bandaged and her mind still reeling, Constantine knelt in front of her. The vampire king, centuries old and impossibly powerful, knelt at her feet and took her hands in his. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly. "Every word. I love you, Lydia, and I understand if that's unwelcome, if I'm asking for something you can't give. I know I'm not human. I know this world is dangerous. I know I have no right to ask you to share it with me. But I'm asking anyway, because I've lived for centuries without feeling what I feel when you're near me, and I can't go back to that emptiness now that I know what it's like to feel alive again." Lydia's heart was thundering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You love me. I love you. I'm human. I'm going to age. I'm going to die eventually in what's probably a blink of an eye to you. I know," and you still, her voice cracked. "You still want this? Want me? More than I've wanted anything in my very long life." His hands tightened on hers. "I know what I'm asking is selfish, but I'm asking anyway. Stay with me, Lydia, not as my healer, not as a political arrangement. As my partner, my consort, my love." She should say no. She should be practical, should think about the impossibilities, should protect her heart from the inevitable pain of loving someone immortal when she wasn't. Instead, she cupped his face in her hands, feeling the smooth coolness of his skin, looking into those red eyes that had terrified her once and now felt like home. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have, since you trusted me with your life when you had no reason to, since you kept your word about protecting me, since you started appearing in the medical wing just to talk because you liked my company. I love you, Constantine, and it terrifies me because this shouldn't work. We shouldn't work." But he kissed her. It was soft and careful, mindful of her injury. But there was promise in it. Promise of passion held in check, of desire tempered by tenderness, of centuries of loneliness ending in this moment. When they broke apart, both breathless despite only one of them needing air, Constantine rested his forehead against hers. "We'll figure it out," he said. "The impossibilities, the complications, all of it. Together." "Together," Lydia agreed. The weeks that followed felt like a dream. Constantine formally announced Lydia as his consort, which sent shockwaves through vampire society but less resistance than expected apparently. Saving the king's life and helping put down a coup earned significant respect. Lydia continued her studies, now with full support of the Night Court's resources. She learned vampire healing in earnest, became genuinely skilled at treating her adopted people, and she fell deeper in love with Constantine every single day. He was attentive without being smothering, protective without being controlling. He challenged her intellectually, made her laugh, showed her wonders of his long-life art and music and places that existed only in the underground realms of vampire society. He introduced her to allies and friends, supported her education, and looked at her like she was the center of his universe. They talked endlessly, about everything. About his past, her future, their present. About the complications of their relationship, the political implications, the personal challenges. "People will expect you to turn me eventually," Lydia said one night, curled against him in his chambers while he read and she studied. "To become like you, only if you want it," Constantine said, his fingers threading through her hair. "I'll never force that choice on you, Lydia. If you want to live a human life, to age naturally, to keep your mortality, I'll treasure every moment we have and deal with the grief when it comes. And if I do want it, someday?" He set his book aside, giving her his full attention. "Then we'll make sure you're ready, that you understand fully what it means, what you'll gain and what you'll lose. Turning is irreversible. I need you to be absolutely certain before we even consider it." "How long did it take you to adjust?" she asked curiously. "Years, decades, really." His expression went distant. "Being reborn as a vampire is violent, disorienting. Everything you are gets stripped away and rebuilt. Your senses sharpen until the world is almost painful. Your hunger becomes an entity unto itself. Your human life feels like a dream you can barely remember." He focused on her again. "I wouldn't wish that struggle on you unless you truly wanted immortality more than anything else." Lydia considered this. "I don't know if I do. Right now, I'm happy being human, being with you, learning and growing and living this impossible life we've built." "Then that's enough," he said simply. "You're enough, exactly as you are." She kissed him for that, and the kiss deepened into something more. They'd been careful with each other physically, both aware of the danger inherent in a vampire's strength and hunger. But Constantine was always controlled, always gentle, always putting her safety and comfort first. That night, they crossed the threshold they'd been dancing around for weeks, and Lydia discovered that immortality and supernatural power aside, being with Constantine felt fundamentally right in a way nothing else ever had. Afterward, wrapped in silk sheets with her head on his chest, listening to the slow beat of his heart, Lydia felt something settle in her soul. "I think I want forever," she said quietly. "Not now, not soon. But someday, when I've lived enough of my human life to feel ready to let it go, I want forever with you." She felt his arms tighten around her. "I'll be here," he promised. "For however long you need to be ready. For forever after that." The decision about Lydia's turning came 2 years later, after she'd completed her pharmacy degree and begun genuine practice as a healer in the night court. She'd lived enough of her human life, she decided. Experienced enough, learned enough, grown enough. She was ready for forever. The turning ritual was private, attended only by Constantine, Seraphine, and a few others Lydia had come to consider family. Constantine explained every step, gave her a dozen chances to back out, and only proceeded when she affirmed again that this was what she wanted. "It's going to hurt," he warned, his expression grave. "I'll make it as quick as I can, but the transformation itself will be agony, and when you wake you'll be different. Still you, but changed fundamentally." "I know," Lydia said. "I'm ready." He cupped her face in his hands, his red eyes searching hers one last time. "I love you, Lydia Vance, in this life and the next." "I love you too, Constantine Drukaleshti. Now stop stalling and give me forever." His bite was sharp and clean, and Lydia felt her life drain away with surprising calm. She'd spent 2 years studying this process, knew exactly what was happening as Constantine's venom flooded her system, as her heart slowed and her breathing stopped, as she died, and then agony, pure, searing agony as her body rebuilt itself cell by cell. She was dimly aware of Constantine holding her, murmuring in languages she didn't understand, his presence the only anchor in the storm of transformation. When she woke, the world had changed. Everything was sharper, colors more vivid, sounds more distinct, sense complex beyond imagining. She could hear Constantine's heartbeat across the room, could smell the different types of blood in the bodies around her, could feel power thrumming through her veins like electricity. And she was hungry. Gods, she was so hungry. "Easy," Constantine said, suddenly there beside her. "I know. The hunger is overwhelming at first. But you're strong, Lydia. You can control it." She focused on his voice, on the familiar comfort of his presence, and slowly the hunger receded to manageable levels. When she finally opened her eyes and looked at him, she gasped. He'd always been beautiful, but now she could see him as vampires saw each other. The play of light across his skin, the subtle shifts in his expression, the power that radiated from him like heat. He was magnificent. "There you are," he said softly, and his smile was pure relief. "Welcome to immortality, my love." Lydia's first words in her new life were characteristically practical. "I need blood, and then I need a mirror, and then I need you to explain why everything smells like colors." Constantine laughed, the sound joyful and free, and pulled her into his arms. "All in good time. First, let's get you fed and oriented. Then we have forever to figure out the rest." Adjusting to vampire life was exactly as challenging as Constantine had warned. Lydia struggled with the hunger, with controlling her new strength, with processing the overwhelming sensory input. But she had excellent teachers, Constantine, Seraphine, and the other elders who'd taken her into their fold. And she had purpose, continuing her work as a healer, now with the added benefit of truly understanding vampire physiology from the inside. She discovered gifts she hadn't expected. Her analytical mind translated well to the enhanced processing speed of a vampire brain. Her empathy deepened, allowing her to read people with uncanny accuracy. And she had an unexpected talent for the kind of blood magic that powered vampire healing, intuiting techniques that took others decades to learn. "You're extraordinary," Constantine told her one evening, watching her successfully treat a patient who'd been poisoned with substances similar to what had nearly killed him years ago. "I knew you were brilliant as a human, but you're becoming one of our finest healers." "I have a good teacher," Lydia said, nodding toward the elderly vampire who'd been instructing her. Then she grinned. "And excellent motivation. Can't have my consort dying on me now that we're both immortal. Wouldn't dream of it." He pulled her close, mindless of the healers and patients around them. "I have far too much to live for now." 5 years after Lydia's turning, Constantine formally proposed marriage, not the informal vampire bonding they'd already participated in, but a full ceremonial union that would bind them legally and magically in the eyes of both vampire and human society. The wedding was spectacular, blending human and vampire traditions in ways that delighted everyone involved. Lydia wore white silk that complemented her new pale skin and the silver white her hair had become after her turning. Constantine wore black, his white hair crowned with the circlet that marked him as king, They spoke vows that promised eternity, that acknowledged both the human love that had started this and the immortal bond that sustained it. When Constantine kissed his bride, the entire night court erupted in celebration that lasted 3 days. 10 years after the wedding, Lydia was called to treat an emergency in the human district, a young woman who'd been attacked and was bleeding out. The woman was a student, Lydia discovered, same age Lydia had been when she'd stumbled into this world. Scared and brilliant and desperately trying to help someone she'd found injured in an alley, Lydia saved her life and in the girl's grateful eyes saw an echo of her younger self. "You're human," the girl said, confused. "But you're so fast, so strong." "I was human once," Lydia said gently, "before I saved a vampire king's life and accidentally fell in love with him." The girl's eyes widened. "The Lady Draculeshti, the healer queen. I've heard stories about you." "Stories tend to exaggerate," Lydia said with a smile. "The truth is much simpler. I was in the wrong place at the right time. I made a choice to help when I was scared and uncertain. And that choice changed everything." "Do you regret it?" the girl asked. "Becoming what you are now." Lydia thought about her life, the challenges, the joys, the love that filled every moment. She thought about Constantine waiting for her at home, probably worrying despite knowing she was perfectly capable of handling herself. She thought about the work she did, the people she helped, the world she'd become part of. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "This life, this impossible, beautiful, complicated life is everything I never knew I needed." That night she returned to the palace and found Constantine in their chambers, reading by lamplight as he often did. He looked up when she entered, and his expression softened in the way it only did for her. "Long night?" he asked. "Interesting night," Lydia said, shedding her medical bag and crossing to him. "Met a girl who reminded me of myself once upon a time. Before you were dragged to a bleeding vampire's bedside?" "Exactly before that." She settled into his lap, comfortable and familiar after years together. "Made me think about how absurdly lucky I was, that your guards grabbed the wrong healer, that I happened to have enough knowledge to save you, that everything aligned perfectly to bring us together." "Luck," Constantine mused, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I prefer to think of it as fate." "You believe in fate?" "I believe in you," he said simply. "In us. In the fact that against all odds and logic a human pharmacy student saved my life and then proceeded to save me in every way that matters. If that's not fate, I don't know what is." Lydia kissed him, slow and sweet, and felt the same flutter in her chest she'd felt that first time despite it no longer beating. Some things she'd learned transcended physiology. "I love you," she said against his lips. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the forvers we have left." "I love you too," Constantine replied. "My healer, my queen, my heart." Outside their chambers the night court continued its eternal existence beneath Prague's streets. Political intrigue unfolded. Cases needed treatment. The world turned with its usual complications. But inside this moment there were just two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and chosen to build forever together. Lydia Vance had walked into a vampire's bedchamber terrified and unprepared, mistaken for someone she wasn't, and thrust into a situation beyond her understanding. She'd made choices that should have gotten her killed, fallen in love with someone she shouldn't have, and transformed her entire existence in ways she never could have imagined. And she wouldn't change a single thing, because sometimes the wrong person in the right place at exactly the right time was precisely what the universe needed. Sometimes mistaken identity led to true love. Sometimes saving a life meant finding your own. And sometimes forever started with borrowed cloak and a case of very fortunate mistaken identity. Years stretched into decades, decades into centuries. Lydia became legendary in her own right, the healer queen who revolutionized vampire medicine, who bridged the gap between human and vampire medical knowledge, who trained generations of healers in techniques that saved countless lives. She and Constantine ruled together, partners in every sense, their love story becoming the kind of legend whispered about in courts across the world. They had forever, and they filled it with purpose and passion and the deep, abiding love that came from truly knowing another soul. They had challenges. Immortality was never simple, but they faced them together, just as they'd faced that first desperate night, when a pharmacy student had looked at a dying king and decided to fight for him. In quiet moments, when they were alone in the chambers they'd shared for hundreds of years, Constantine would sometimes trace the faint scar on Lydia's shoulder, the mark from Muriel's blade, which had persisted even through her turning. "My battle scar," Lydia would say, smiling. "Your proof of courage," Constantine would correct. "The mark of the night you chose me over safety, over sense, over everything. Best choice I ever made. Second best," he'd counter. "The first was choosing to save my life when you had every reason to run." and Lydia would kiss him and think about the strange winding path that had led from that terrified moment to this perfect one. About how sometimes the best things in life came from mistakes and accidents, and moments of sheer chaos. About how love could bloom in the strangest places, between the most unlikely people, and grow into something that transcended mortality itself. Her forever had started with blood-stained silk and desperate hope. It had been complicated and dangerous and absolutely worth every moment of fear and uncertainty, because on the other side of that fear had been Constantine, had been love, had been a life more extraordinary than anything she could have planned or predicted. And as the centuries unfolded before them, Lydia Draculeshti, once Lydia Vance, pharmacy student and accidental healer, lived every moment of her immortal existence grateful for that long-ago case of mistaken identity that had changed absolutely everything. The end came not with drama or tragedy, but with quiet contentment, the knowledge that their story, which had begun in chaos and blood, had transformed into something beautiful and enduring. They had built a legacy of healing and love, had changed vampire society for the better, had proven that the deepest connections could form in the most unexpected circumstances. They had forever. And they spent it well, together, exactly as they'd promised on that first impossible night when a human girl had looked at a dying vampire king and said yes to the impossible. Some love stories were gentle and expected. Others were forged in crisis and blood and desperate hope. Theirs was the latter. And it was perfect.